Suresh K. Goel, former Indian envoy, is joining us from New Delhi. Mohammad Inham, journalist, Star TV of Sri Lanka, is also joining us now. He's joining us from Colombo. First up to Mr. Goel. Mr. Goel, how important is the stability of Sri Lanka for India? As far as India is concerned, having a peaceful neighbor becomes very important for us.
Of the topmost importance. To have instability in any country right on our doors, in a neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, separated just by about a few miles across the straits, anything that happens there will affect India's security. You recall when the economic crisis began and the refugees actually came into India across the seas, and we had to take care of them. That time it was refugees. You remember the Tamil problem, which affected India so deeply and led to the assassination of one former prime minister. Therefore, anything that happens in Sri Lanka affects India immediately. Political stability in Sri Lanka is of the topmost importance for our own security. Second thing, I would say that what we are witnessing in Sri Lanka now, it may have started as an economic issue, economic crisis, but today it has become a movement for political change from the present government led by Gotabaya Rajapaksa to whoever comes now, most likely an all-party government. And I think that is when the process of political reconciliation would begin if it takes place.
Right. Before I go to Mohammad as well, Mr. Goel, do you feel in the light of all of what you mentioned, New Delhi's stance is correct on this issue? Because as far as India is concerned, we're adopting a wait-and-watch policy. We have not taken sides with the Rajapaksa family either and maintained a fair bit of neutrality as far as this issue is concerned.
Largely, but I think we should do more in terms of humanitarian support to Sri Lanka, because before they are able to settle their long-term economic restructuring program with the help of IMF and other international agencies, they would need a lot of support for the short-term humanitarian needs, fuel, food, etc., etc. And there, India as an immediate neighboring country will have a huge role to play. Second thing, very important, and I completely agree with it, that India should stay away from the political process for the time being. Otherwise, we will be in the same soup as China at the moment is. We should stay away from politically, but support economically.
So support economically and help resolve the humanitarian crisis, but stay away politically is your stance, and I appreciate that. To hold on with us right there, Mohammad Inham, he's a journalist of Star TV from Sri Lanka, also joining us. How would you, as a journalist, view the situation in Sri Lanka, this complete state of anarchy that is taking place? Would you call this a revolution by the people to throw away a government which has been marred with allegations of corruption?
Yes, the Sri Lankan people hating all the politicians, have a parliament member, 225 members have, all of go home, the people saying. There are a lot of things, people's very sad condition in medicine crisis and food crisis and fuel crisis. Lot of things in Sri Lanka, very sad condition in Sri Lanka on going to downly minus downly. Many other countries to be helping NGOs to Sri Lanka, but Sri Lankan politicians, they can't to do right political. The peoples are very angry with the politicians. Yesterday, yesterday a lot of peoples are protesting. President, secretary, president, resident, and prime minister resident fired it. That's a matter. But Sri Lankan politician can't step down. President, speaker, you know Sri Lanka speaker Mahinda Abeyewardena on Saturday evening announced that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has informed him that he would step down 13 July 2020. The speaker said in order maintain peaceful transit. It is the performance for the enter this country remain peaceful future. All public
Yes.
servant and general public are requested to
Yes.
remain
Yes,
quiet
hold on with
for
us.
the
Mr. Goel is also with us. Mr. Goel, when it comes to a power vacuum, there is always an apprehension as far as radical and extremist actors is concerned. Is it something that New Delhi needs to be wary of about at present and tread cautiously?
Any power vacuum will cause concern and problem in the region beyond the country. However, what I see happening now really is that I do not really fear a power vacuum in Sri Lanka. Yes, Rajapaksa has fled away, but the speaker is in control of the political process at the moment. And I'm quite confident that within the next few days, by the time Rajapaksa resigns on 13, there would be an interim president in the shape of speaker. There would be a government on the ground, including people from the different parties. There would be somebody responsible to take care of the economic matters, particularly interventions with the IMF and the World Food Program. Therefore, I'm not really apprehensive of a power vacuum in Sri Lanka in the wake of the demonstrations. On the other hand, this should lead by the next week, by the middle of the next week, to a government which will be largely acceptable to the people, at least in the beginning. And that government, I hope, doesn't do something seriously wrong, again to get into a crisis of trust and confidence, because that is what actually is happening at the moment. There's a crisis of total trust in the government, and the new government, all-party government, I think, will be able to stay away and resolve this crisis.
And all the nations in this particular region, including India, would you like to see more coming in from them to help them through this humanitarian and economic crisis and be in touch with the key stakeholders to be able to help the nation now build back slowly, limp back slowly to normalcy?
Absolutely. There is a greater need for the humanitarian need, medicines, food, fuel, etc. And I think once we have an interim government in place, led by an interim president, we will have a channel which is available to deliver that humanitarian support. Most often for the support, for the humanitarian assistance, the delivery process is a problem because there is always a political element attached to it as to who in the recipient country will be working with us. But an all-party government will be actually helping us in the delivery by staying away from the political differentiation and the political intervention.
Right. And this crisis, does it ring alarm bell for other troubled economies as well, or do you see this restricted just to Sri Lanka in this region?
I think it's a message to the other economies. And the message is clear that whatever political promises you make, eventually the economic policies would require a very hard realization of ground realities. And the unfortunate truth is that Sri Lanka, in this particular case, ignored the ground realities and got into this rigmarole of and into this morass. Number two, do not become so totally dependent economically on another country like China in this case, so that you lose all your bearings. So there are several messages in the process to the other countries not to fall into the trap of things like BRI, where you become totally debt dependent and do not ignore economic ground realities.
Do the strategic interests of India get impacted with the Chinese footprint growing in this region?
I think over the last few months, China also has realized that the situation is far too complex for them to do anything economically. They still have the management control over the Hambantota present port project, etc., etc. But I think Chinese are very, very carefully weighing their options in the region, and they don't seem to be really playing too much of an active role, either economically or politically. Given all that, I think India should also realize that from the past experience, that to be overactive politically could actually harm our long-term relations. And therefore, I'm happy to note that India has stayed away from any kind of political messaging. And they have really stayed with the humanitarian. That's a right course to stay on, activate and strengthen the humanitarian component of the action and the relationship. Yes.
And you know, you mentioned that you're very happy that India's stance is correct in this, and they've stayed away from politics. They've only, you know, restricted themselves to the humanitarian affairs, and that's the stance India should maintain. And you're lauding India for its efforts. And as far as the economic aid that you mentioned is concerned, I was reading reports that says that India's recent economic aid stands at 3.5 billion US dollars, 3.5 billion US dollars, because we're Sri Lanka's neighbors and first responders. How much more can we help Sri Lanka?
I think I recall the statement made by Vikram Ranasinghe earlier also. He realizes that every country which is coming to support Sri Lanka will have limitations. But within those limitations, if whatever India can do will be a great investment in the relationship with the country. And I think at this stage, Sri Lanka also understands what the limitations are and they fully appreciate it. But whatever maximum we can do, we should do that really in the interest of stability in the region
Yes.
and in the interest of peace in the region.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Mr. Goel, for joining us.